I'll say roll them, and then I will start. All right. Hello. Thank you so very much for taking time to come see this talk. This talk is primarily about how do we make a transition from point A to point B. Maybe you've been in this industry a long time. Maybe you're thinking of transitioning from one to the other. Maybe you're just stuck in a rut and trying to figure out what you're doing. But I think all of us safely can say at some point or another we have faced our own version of imposter syndrome, right? We've all gone through the, nope, not me, I don't know enough, oh my gosh, I'm just terrified. I'm not good enough, I'm not good enough. The thing, whatever your thing is. I'm going to start instead with a story and kind of get back to that. So I don't know how you grew up, but in my house, my brother had the stereo, which meant I had to watch or listen or whatever to what he wanted to do. So that meant 80s music. It was the 80s, so the band Yes, 5. There were all kinds of crazy ways people would try to get information. You get it on the radio, right? But let's talk about that for a second. There was no internet yet. There was no ease. There were no devices in your hand. Well, they were Walkman, right? So you might have had headsets or whatever, but my brother had Yes 90125, and he played it over and over again, and I discovered my own sound. The thing I liked, it was different. The art of noise was a couple of crazy people in a lab making music, in my mind. And so what happens is, I go and fast forward a few years after having been force-fed, owner of A Lonely Heart, and this entire album of really creatively built stuff, and I said, but where's my stuff? I would like my own. But if you grew up, depending on how you grew up, we only had the one stereo, so I got to hear a lot of Yes music. Meanwhile, I went back later on and took another listen to 90125 when I had some clarity distance. We're talking years. And I discovered some new things about myself. I learned that I really dug the way they built this album. And I said, but why would I care? What is it that makes this so different? It turns out there's this dude. His name is Trevor Horn. And it turns out he has made tons of albums that I've heard that song, and these are all really popular things. Maybe I just love Trevor Horn as a producer. Do they know it's Christmas? If you ever heard of Relax, Don't Do It, Frankie Goes to Hollywood, that kind of thing. I just like his work. But whatever happened to the art of noise? Well, they broke up, right? Nothing new. Gone, bye-bye, thanks so much for playing. Except they brought out one of these liquidation sale box sets. I don't know if you've seen this with any of your bands. It was basically just piles of music. There was nothing new in it, and it was gone. But if we come forward much closer to now, meaning like last year, 2 years ago, you get to wondering, where are they now? Whatever happened? And maybe you stumbled across something in your social media to find in the margin of another ad by accident. It turns out, I found out that there's this guy. You look through about that guy who produced the albums and everything else. He had a music programmer that worked for him. His name is J.J. Jesselsick. J.J. Jesselsick is the thread that ties this story together, because it turns out this producer had his programmer, and that programmer had happened to be working on 90125 and was listening to some drum beats he was capturing to help produce the album. And it turns out during that he got this crazy idea to make the art of noise. So the thing that I grew up loathing turns out to be the only reason the art of noise actually existed. That is a huge thing to me, right? What if it turns out this thing that drove you crazy as a younger person turns out to be the catalyst that created something you absolutely loved? How do you deal with that in your head? But that's kind of like the way that our careers work, isn't it? Because your career, and I need to get up here so I can see a reference to my slides, your career is like that. It takes time to learn and grow. It takes time for you to figure out what direction you want to go in, and that's what this is really going to be about. Because I've found it is immensely rewarding to be able to help people find their path, right? And I think it comes to us in waves. It goes in different ways as we progress. So how do you do that? How do we add value to ourselves or other people? And that's where conferences become this amazing place. Not just that we all get together in a room and talk about the stuff that broke, worked, didn't work. We need interaction to figure out the next step of our journeys. To know that we're not alone, even if, it's to talk about that thing that we're not thrilled about, it takes two people to say, I hate this. I hate it too. Oh, great. And boom, and off you go. It's a start, and that's what we need. So one answer to add that value could be maturity. The ability to admit we're wrong or need help. If you got to see Side Dragon's talk, it's really a lot about that maturity, isn't it? It was working through his own misunderstandings about himself, his misgivings, his own trust issues, among other things. But that's that maturity. Another involves actively seeking the help of other people, or the influx of new ideas. Hello! Welcome to Circle City Con. It is a wonderful thing to have the opportunity to stand here in a room with you, that you are actually here listening to some idea from this guy. I appreciate each and every one of you who took the time to come out here and hear this, because it means to me that you had a curiosity or a break in your schedule. Either one, I'm good with both at this point. The thing is, we cover these ideas as an arc. Have you ever heard of a story arc? Story arcs are these ideas that, hey, there's kind of a first part and then you're going to come back and visit another part of the same story. If you've ever seen things like, Pulp Fiction, or a story that you just see a piece of it and they aren't necessarily told in order, but you come to realize it's all part of a larger story. That's what this is going to be about. Now, that's the metaphor we will use to have this discussion. But there are some disclaimers that are necessary as we go on our journey together, and that is that you have to leave the comfort of the herd. If you ever saw that show from a few years back called Chuck, it was the idea that you can't just stay in your little group. Chris talked about this too. If you have an opportunity to go out on your devices or look up a talk or two, look for a talk by L.O. Punk. That's E-L-L-O Punk. That talks about how to be a mentor and how to get mentored. It's a fantastic talk that helps expand these ideas that we're about to go over. Another one is from my friend who's sitting in the back of the room. Yes, it's Kathleen sitting right back there. She does a great talk that actually covers how we communicate and build in a community. How do we volunteer? What does it mean? What do we do and how do we learn? And that's where we go with this, because you will meet jerks. This is not going to be easy. This is going to be, there are times where you get nipped or talked down to or misspoken to or about. And these things are going to happen and they're going to stink. They're going to stink and they're going to hurt. And that goes right back to Side Dragon again. That emotion. If you see L.O. Punk's talk, it talks about dealing with that. And how do you feel? What's your self-worth? And going back to adding that value. But persistence pays. We know gatekeeping is bad, but persistence will win the day most of the time. So let's talk about this. The agenda, again, in story arcs, right? In being able to understand all of these parts of one journey. Yours. This is about you. Where you are. So we're going to talk through some of these. If you imagine, again, it's as you prefer. It's getting that start and saying, how do I drink from this fire hose? And moving on to, wait, I think I figured out where I want to be. And then it's, oh wow, wait, I think I have something to contribute. And then you realize, I think it would be rewarding to help others contribute. And then you have to defend at all levels against the big bad burnout beast. But let's get into it. There are many types and locations for cons and events. You got your local stuff, you've got regional stuff. You should always start at the meetup and the local professional associations. Hello, I'd like to tell you I have this certificate right here and it's amazing. And you're, okay, great, and thank you very much, and I'll have a piece of that pie. That's terrific, thank you very much. Oh, a drink ticket, I'll take one. And you move on and you try to figure out where you can go. I know, why don't you visit a local or regional B-Sides conference? That would be nice. Why? Because you need to do that before you take on some of these. If you have ever gone to DEF CON or some other larger event and you're like, oh my gosh, look at all the people. If you go to the shopping mall and decide, nah, you might want to rethink just going to DEF CON as your first outing all by your lonesome. It's great to get a travel buddy or someone you can say, too much, time to go see the pinball museum, whatever it is. Now, when we look at traveling further, you can learn about other cultures. It broadens your own perspective, which is what we need to do, each of us. is to realize being alone in the room will not help you get out of the situation you're in. If you are trying to grow your career or move forward, you're going to have to think about other places. Hey, get out. Circle CityCon. You should check that out. But really, there are sometimes no substitutes for finding a conference that is more specialized to your need. Because once you find that piece of direction that gets you going, that really programs you, or gives you that sense of, oh my gosh, I am not going to bed tonight, or how did it get to be sun up? You've maybe found it. And there are specific events just for you. But let's keep going a little bit broader than that. There are going to be times it's necessary to bite that bullet and go on behalf of your company or on behalf of your profession and go do the corporate. It is important. It is part of life. And you will hear in a group like this a wide range of experiences. That will not be yours. Yours is unique to you, and you need to embrace that fact because there will be opportunities that other people may or may not understand, but you yourself might grow to realize. And by the way, sometimes it's okay to skip the restroom, apparently. I don't know. No, it's the people who do CTFs, those who take part in challenges, sometimes fall in. And that's okay too, because you need those capture the flag events to learn where your limits are and what you can grow in. It's another way to do the same thing. In my mind, the conference to your career is the same. It's just a much longer engagement because it's the course of your entire career. In your career, raise your hand if you have ever said, I don't feel like going out there right now. I'm just going to stay home instead. Thank you. Okay. Now let's move on to another one. Hey, we have an event coming up across town. Who wants to go? Right? Why did you raise your hand? Well, I don't have to sit at the desk today. Or is it something that you can actually leverage and dig something out of? Hey, we need you to go talk to this vendor and help figure out a situation. It doesn't sound exciting, but maybe it is to you. It depends on you. But let's move forward. Let's start with that career level 1. If we were doing this as a D&D game, you get out the dice and you roll. Level 1, you go to fight the chickens in the yard, right? Because you got to get experience somewhere. Don't mistake your local groups. Don't mistake the value of that local support job. The first step is stepping out of the comfort zone, getting away from the herd. This seems logical. See, part of this talk is engineered to discuss those who say, I'm an intern. I literally had this conversation yesterday morning. We have an intern who's come to work with the unit I work in. They said, I have no idea what I want to do. Actually, she doesn't sound like that, so please don't think that's supposed to be an impression. And I'm not going to try, it would be bad. Because they sound much nicer. The point is, when you're looking into what next, if there's a gray cloud going in your head, then this is a good thing to consider. Talk about the maps. What rings are there that you need to step out and consider? Once you get out and find the thing that kind of interests you a little bit, let's just talk about what experience you're expecting to get at level 1 when you're fighting those chickens. You're going to have to look at that first conference, and I can't talk about other people, but it is literally like drinking from a fire hose. The very first event I went to was B-Sides Las Vegas back in 2011, okay? Short story, the guy who was up here just a few minutes ago was the guy I ran into. Didn't know who he was. I just got done helping move some boxes. And I said, what do I do now? And he said, what can you do? And he said, why don't you go join the security team out there? Well, it turns out someone flaked on the AV team and I was able to join up with them because that's where my experience was. But they gave me the chance. You see, I had taken the chance to step out. They allowed me to come in. What will you do for yourself in this way? Will you, just like Chris talked about the dog shoveling the snow, take the chance and step outside that comfort zone and push for your experience? You're going to have to get away from the wall. If you have a lot of trouble talking to folks, this is going to get in your way. You're going to have to work on that. Even if you walk up the very first time and put your foot all the way into your mouth, and the only thing that prevents you from inverting entirely is your belt buckle. It is important to recognize mistakes will be made. Move past them. Get over them. That's not easy. I'm the guy sitting up here and saying, so thanks, I appreciate you telling me that. But why are these other people here? What are they doing? Why are they doing it? Why are they trying to share what they've learned? Is it because they want to stand up here and be able to say, hey, look at me, I'm on stage? Because I got news for you. This is terrifying. But public speaking, you get up, start in your local group. Why? Because this is part of what builds you. This gives you the room to grow. You have to be able to focus on yourself this way and recognize it. Normally you go out to an event, you talk to some folks, it was nice, I had some pizza, maybe a little bit of something else. You're done, you move on, and it doesn't mean a thing to you. But what if you stopped and took a note? Went out, met 6 new people. Maybe you reach out to those people and see what they're doing next weekend. Or you look for another event where you can connect, because that will give you the opportunity to build the thing you don't know yet how to do. But more than that, you have to get exposure to the names, faces, companies, groups in the area. Why? Because you don't know, at some point, the bridge you build today may be the one that saves your bacon tomorrow. You must take that time. You must make that time. Now, there's life, there's family, there are reasons, there are always excuses. But this is one of those things, I'm not going to lie to you, you never know when you have to call on these people to move things forward for you because you got stuck. Or the manager doesn't like you. Or you got a coworker who's making inappropriate something. Whether it's advances, statements, work items, lighting things on fire every day and you're having to put them out. There are always reasons where it becomes necessary to move ahead or differently or sideways or just out. So, ask if there are local events and classes that can be taken when appropriate. But more about that is learn how to, when we're giving back to, how to find things around, right? See if there are ways in your own workspace that you can help with to grow. Because when you turn out to be the person to ask for help, maybe you don't know. Maybe it's the willingness to partner with someone on a project. Maybe you can go and do a task you normally don't enjoy doing whatsoever. But in so doing, you demonstrate your value to others and maybe you help someone else out, which means they're willing to help you out in return. Cool story, bro. Nice, you're just standing up there making a bunch of slides. You'll notice there are no graphics in this deck because it turns out the stories are what are important because this is your story. And your version of this is different and unique to everybody. But I don't know you. I've got impossible. The thing you're talking about, that's not me. I got bad news. It's important to grow past that. The time to stop doing that is right now, in this room, right here. Tell yourself. Write it down, take a note, watch the video, email it, whatever. The point is you must push to level 2. It's time to specialize. When I got done, I showed up, I got to go to a meetup and I hung out with a buddy and I'm like, why are we in a Thai restaurant with a video projector on a Wednesday night? He's like, because these people are doing cool things. What contribution can I possibly make to this? I don't do what they do. I am different. I have my own thing. Well, it turns out as you choose your major or decide to choose your own adventure and find out that it's bad to try to pick up the babel fish when it scoots across the floor because you failed to pick up the mail from the porch at the beginning of the game, you learn that you might have missed a piece. That's an old text adventure from Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy reference, for those who may have missed. Anyway, so when you get to that point and you realize, you know what, I found this thing that really makes better sense to me, I'm going to have to figure this out. I don't usually make direct statements, but I believe in being a decent person, and there comes a time to explain that being a generalist is okay. If you have focused all the way down to only being able the person who lifts the bag out of the trash can, and that is all you do, eventually this will be automated and you will have no job. You must, in my opinion, I don't usually foot stomp, but there you go. You must be able and willing to be an inch deep and an ocean across, and be willing to dive in when it's necessary. And because, for me, that's been the ability to adapt and actually build my own career, because I am not that guy. Okay, I've got stickers on my laptop, I'm learning about how to apply patches to my bag, but that doesn't mean I know how to break cool things and be all fancy. What I do know, though, is that if you start zeroing in on specific talks and building a progression where you discover the things you like or the things you're paying attention to, you've suddenly discovered you have to step back and recognize that's what's happening. See, in that very first time I went to B-Sides Las Vegas and I had no idea what I was doing, and they let me help with track 3, I sat in a room and sat through talks I would never have chosen for myself. That turned out to be the most amazing experience because it showed me things I would never have said. If I looked at the list and said, what do I want to watch today? I would not have chosen those things. And it opened my head. Not like an actual head wound, I know, but seriously, it gave me, I walked up to almost every presenter and I'm like, that was amazing. I would like to shake your hand because I didn't know what else to do with myself. I had no idea. Kismayanthia, what are you talking about? I used a cell phone to go ahead and trigger this device and then it kicked off this over here and I was halfway around the planet. What? The video's out there. You can actually go back. If you look at the 2011 videos for Kismayanthia, you'll see the exact talk that broke my brain. And I thought it was the most amazing thing. And the same thing happened again when I went to DEF CON 2 years later and saw the guys talking about evil Folka. And I met that person too because I said, this is the most ridiculously amazing thing ever. You can actually break into that machine doing those things with it. But I don't do that. Well, what does it mean then? I'm on a mission because a year after my first B-Sides LV, I went to ShmooCon. And my mind was completely wrecked because I saw all these things I never knew you could do with a computer. And okay, fine, but you go to a few of these things and you're like, okay, I go on a trip and I go do a thing, but you need a buddy. If you go to your first big event alone, it will be tough. If you are like me, I need someone to kind of, okay, let's go. Where are we going? Breakfast. Okay. Well, I know how to eat. That's not the problem. But when it comes to, hey, we're going to go out and do this thing, or we're going to go to see this challenge, I want to see this talk. Why am I standing in line for an hour? Why am I standing here? We're waiting for the next talk. Who cares? But you do, and you should. Because at a larger, more nationally attended event, there is a much broader cross-section of attendees, which means new ideas. Be hungry, be mentally Pac-Man, be Frogger, whatever it takes. You've got to decide that you're hungry. And when you're hungry, you're willing to move and take those risks. And because you have to go back to the idea of attending with that buddy who's going to help guide you a little bit, at least to get the ropes, right? Figure out where you're headed. And when you get closer to that thing, you're going to discover that you bring back something cool to your boss. No, it's not that strange itch and a cough. I'm talking about the fact that you can bring back ideas that you saw at this conference that may be applicable to your actual work life. And in so doing, the possible collaboration with other teams who want to implement the protections against the attacks you saw. See, a lot of these things have been focused around having to step up. And this is the next level of that stepping up. It's level 2. You're not just fighting chickens anymore. Now you're fighting with, I don't know, low-level bunky beasts. Because you're talking about getting closer to middle management or at least being seen. If you watched Monty Python, Flying Circus, they had an entire segment on how not to be seen. This is the wrong talk to be in because this is about moving ahead in your own career arc, because in second arc, you figured out what you want to do. And let's work on that because you're going to stay connected. This is the value back to you, right? The value to management was, I'm growing. I have value. I can do other things that you didn't know I could do before. Okay, terrific. But what does it give you? It gives you now new contacts because, hey, guess what? Here's where you have to create a throwaway persona and get on social media. This is not the one you have your gam on. Is not the one where you're sharing about, this weekend I went to... No, you might share those things with your new conference family because you're going to make some. You're going to meet up with these people. They're going to become important to you. You don't even mean it to happen. You're like, that's not true. I can just throw things away. I don't need stuff. I don't care. But guess what? It really does mean something. It doesn't come quickly or easily, though. This is about having to grow up in an industry and grow your story arc to the point where you are going to have to spend real time. Did you ever play the video game Myst? Yeah, I know, I'm old. Myst, yeah. Did you pull out the pencil and the paper and start trying to draw out the map? Because you're like, I'm lost in these steam tunnels. I don't know where I am. Right here. I didn't want to do that. It was that moment of, oh, and I had to go find paper and a pencil to go see what I could unearth. This is exactly what the problem is. We all get to that point, that, oh, and we go home. Nope, thanks, I'm out, I'm good, bye. No, don't do that to yourself. Take the step. And you said, yeah, cool story, bro. You don't know me. You don't know what I've been through. You don't know what my challenges are. But that doesn't matter because it's another version of this, and it's a block at every level before the end boss. Whatever the end boss is, whether it's going out after 6 p.m. and you leave your room again and don't just order pizza and ice cream to the room and watch reruns of your show that you brought on the streaming device. This is about getting past that because you want to get to the prestige class where you start sharing knowledge, and the only way to get there is to figure out you don't know anything. Once you're aware of the fact that you know nothing, or at least have a whole bunch to learn, you can then step outside yourself, walk up going, tug, tug, tug. More? And they look down. What have you? You need me to just start spoon feeding on what promise do you show? You may become the subject matter expert in your field, in your area. I don't mean the world, I mean like locally, because there's a lot of people out there, and it's okay to mess up. I wrestle with this today, every day. I don't want to start writing this script because I'm going to get it wrong and it will fail. That's my imposter syndrome talking to me. And when I do that, I let it win. And when it wins, I delay, I procrastinate, and wind up having in the next weekly meeting when they're like, what are you working on this weekend? Or this week, excuse me. That script we talked about. Wasn't that last week's work item? But I'm still terrified of it, so I haven't done it yet. It might help to think of this as a progression, right? Let's borrow from some stand-up comics and presenters. Grab your hairbrush and get in front of the mirror, ladies and gentlemen, and record yourself. Time yourself. Because you're about to have to public speak. When you go to present, and you actually watch yourself for the first time and realize you turn into Elvis Presley with a podium, or you just happen to have that nervous tic you never saw before that you just do 1,000 times, and it turns out you could have been a side dancer from Greece, or some other popular something. The point is you need to take the long look at yourself, and this is the hardest. Oh my gosh, unless you happen to be in love with yourself and have a picture of yourself in your locker, this is hard, because now you have to take a look at it. See, like right now, I know I'm being recorded. But I'm not going to break the fourth wall because that means I acknowledge that it's happening and I will get even more nervous. So instead you have to push through and move on. And when you move on, hello, Spock, I need answers. And that's what we need here. You, the person, to figure out that there is a speech cadence that makes sense to you. Maybe you want to watch your favorite whodunit show and go to the last 5 minutes and listen to the way that the ultra smart, impossibly smart, the Alex Trebek of the show. Ever see Jeopardy? Who here has watched Alex Trebek on Jeopardy sound amazingly intelligent when we all know he has the cards? But you know what? That's kind of the thing that we have to recognize about ourselves. Again, it's time to step back, look at what we're doing, and realize in many cases we hold the cards if we're willing to stop and look and see where we are. Which of the story arcs are you currently in? Only you can answer it. Or you can have a friend, buddy up, say, I'm looking at this thing and I think I'm here. And they'll, you're still in the middle arc. You're not here yet. But can you adjust your timing when you go to present? You can do so many things to move through more quickly. See, like this great thing, this mouse, to help me move my butt forward, because I have a tendency to talk an awful lot. But it's getting the timing right as we move forward. So realize when you're giving a public speaking thing, you can go through a demo, but you might want to make a backup, and then a backup for that backup. I actually carry a small minion with me everywhere I go because it's the backup of my presentation. It's actually a rubber USB drive, or it's a regular USB drive encased in a little rubber minion object. It's incredibly hilarious, and he's lost a foot, so it looks really violent, but the point is he still has my back. So now let's get out there. And on open mic night, at your local meeting, treat it like open mic night, or Hacker Karaoke, yo, we're gonna sing. And you need to get out there and present at your local meetup, or your B-sides, but I don't know what to talk about. What have you been learning? What have you been trying to do? What class have you recently done? Maybe you learned how to set up your Raspberry Pi for the very first time and you want to do an intro talk. They'll listen. At the very least, you will start to see, because you must take that step and get the ball rolling. Because as you grow and move forward, you've got to go for it. Get that talk accepted. You've got to polish it. And you've got to give it a try. I myself have a lot of trouble getting it right. Well, I've presented many times. You got Wolf Gerlich here. Yes, it's Kathleen over there. And a bunch of other nice folks. And they're willing to talk to you. Usually if you offer to buy them a coffee or something, you can probably get them to sit down and chat over whatever it is you're looking to learn, or at least get some additional guidance. But if you have the ability to present as part of your repertoire, the value to management is huge, but I don't like presenting. I've got bad news. This is one of those things that is like the vegetables, proverbially, we did not care to eat. Find a way, put them through the blender, mash them, mix them up, whatever it is. Because if you can get this one thing, and that's not clickbait, this will move everything else forward. Because now you start to battle your inner demons about that fear. And the goal is to represent well, by the way, because if you get really good at this and you can talk out loud and see, the people you work for have to know they're still valuable. It's an important little thing. It's almost like talking back. Try to leave some room, but always be ready to support. That doesn't make sense yet. I know it doesn't. But if you've done presentations and you maybe leave room for a question, an obvious question, that would give them during the presentation room to ask a question that you know you have the answer to. That sets them up for success and builds them up. And by the way, that's what this is really about. Building yourself up and the people around you. Because as we work together to start bringing each other up, we provide value back to our coworkers. See, now you start to get a reputation, potentially, if you're agreeable, if you treat others well. Do we have to go back and look at Side Dragon's talk again? Look at Elo Punk's talk about mentorship. Look at Kathleen's talk about how we learn and how you connect and volunteer. Why would you do it? Because you're looking to grow. You're looking to build each other up. This becomes so important that having presented at a conference may also expand your approach to fixing other things. Because now you have demonstrated not only your willingness to learn, but to learn from others. Just because I'm standing here doesn't mean I know anything. It means I was willing to fight my battle and stand here, and they said, we think you've structured it well enough and it's worth sharing. That's what it is. You know better than I do, I bet. Because what I do is not what you do. And the value back to you is learning that this will help with your self-confidence. And deal with job interviews. The worst presentation of your life might just be the job interview. That and traffic control. So I would recommend you practice the interview part and not the air traffic part. At least not live. Presenting at conferences puts you into a new group of people, the other presenters, those willing to share. This grows your personal network and, again, may give you a new and specific connection. Hi, Kathleen. It's so good to see you again. And so many other wonderful people, because that now means they become part of your extended network. And again, you never know when it becomes helpful to have that insight, because they've seen things you haven't. And did we not just say it's important to realize we don't know anything? So we've got to learn from those around us. Yeah, okay, there's level boss again, which means we've reached the end of another arc. But you don't know me, and I'm afraid. I have imposter syndrome. Right? Okay, fine, let's go into the fourth arc. It's now your turn to GM. You decided somehow that someone convinced you that you should run an event or start something. What is wrong with you? Nothing, as it turns out. Because this is my fourth year for coordinating B-Side San Antonio, and it actually changes your perspective about how things happen. And people say, are you out of your Vulcan mind? Because this may open the door to bigger things at work. And by the way, this can opened itself starting last year, and I'm on round 2 of that. And turns out a corkscrew inside that as you move up that little level inside the story arc. For me, I hope yours is different and better. It's not a bad thing. It just means that someone's going to come and ask you to help put on a presentation for some kids. And do you know how to make some lights blink? When they see that I'm obsessed with it to begin with. See, I took off the blinkies during the presentation. Anyway, this puts us back to how do we leverage this at work? Well, now you have a way to build contacts because now you're doing a thing and people want to look for you to give them an opportunity. You've suddenly put yourself in the odd position of having something they want, whether it's exposure or an opportunity to polish their own skill, or they want to learn something from you or get something from you. It gives you the room for all new challenges. Isn't that awesome? Because you weren't tired enough before. But that's what this is about as you level up and move through that story arc of your career, is getting more things that you can do because you want to grow. Because staying still means getting stagnant. And let me tell you, if you have never had the experience of thinking, I have arrived, I think I'm good, I could do this for about 20 years and coast, this will be fine. And then it all comes crashing down around your ears as you realize, no, that doesn't work. That's not how that goes. And let me tell you, I've had that experience, and it's no fun. I know I'm being recorded, so we'll just say it's no fun. But now, what does this do? What value to you is there when you start running things? Well, now you get help. You have to learn about marketing. You learn about how to value situations and how to negotiate a little bit. And if you're not good at this, get help. Admit it openly. My very first DEF CON, there was a badge kit that was handed to me, and I had to solder something, and I said, I don't know how to solder. And they said, well, that's not our problem. Thanks for the cash. Move along. And I said, what do I do now? And in my head, the way it worked out to me is I took a little walk over to the hardware hacking village, walked in the main room, held it up and said, I am a dummy and do not know how to solder. Help. In under 30 seconds, a hand shot up in the ocean of over here. And there was a line of people just like me. And this person was helping them so they could get the electronic badge up and running. Who does that? An amazingly nice person, if you ask me. But there was the opportunity again. I don't recommend necessarily walking into a crowded room and shouting something. That's your call. But it seems to have worked out okay for me so far because this is about team building. You're going to have a volunteer army if you try to run something at this level, and you must understand how to gently encourage without squashing. Because if you get angry and you get to that rage quit moment, and you just say, man, this is not worth it. Oh my gosh. You can tear the whole thing down. I thought it was called something like, I had a weird name I wanted to give it, but someone smarter than me said, no, it's kind of a founder's syndrome. See, you get so into something and you burn out, and when you reach that burnout, you get to this real other problem. But we'll get there in a second, because again, if we look back and say, well, it's nice for you to say it's okay to run something, you don't know what I'm going through right now, so you can't possibly understand. You're right. Because you're afraid of no one showing up. B-Side San Antonio is next week. This is my 4th year coordinating the event, and we are actually on track to bring in just around 600 people. This amazes me. I was handed such an opportunity from someone who did an amazing job. And they handed it off to me, and I had to start over. But we'll get there in a second, because we have to talk about burnout. If you've gone through all of these things, at every one of those level boss moments with the imposter syndrome, there's a risk of the beast of burnout. And when it shows up, it rears its head, you get exhausted too easily. You find you're frustrated for no reason. You get, I don't care. Or you shut down and you curl up into a ball and you watch reruns of your favorite show about 1,000 times. But you look back on those things. Give yourself a moment for the pity party. It's going to happen. You can't escape that. It's going to come, and it weighs on you like a wet blanket that was out in the sun and smells kind of foul. And you're like, I don't care. I'm going to sit here and then after you kind of realize you're holding on to a moldy blanket, and it's rotting you, you have to look back at the things that invigorated you in the first place. You must revisit those original things, because you know what? That original thing that got you interested may just open a different door. Seek to reconnect with the origins of an idea and see if there's something now further in a different arc, because you're like, yeah, but I already did level 1. I've done the speed run through Mario, whatever. You've done it, but you haven't redone it. And when you visit it again later on, it's amazing the things you might miss, whether it's your favorite book, an inspirational text, or maybe just a movie you've seen 1,000 times. It can look for that, it can be that time to look for the people who will now reinvigorate you, the people who still care, the people who are still excited by all of this madness. On Twitter, because you've all opened social media accounts now, right? You've all chosen a name for yourself because there are 1,000 Johns, Steves, Sallys, and Susies. But how many sciatic nerds are there, or fluffy bunnies, or whatever you want to be called? Make it yours, make it unique, but also realize there are other people out there who need you just as much as you need them. And there is a small cadre of them. There aren't enough of them. See, there was someone yesterday having a rough time, someone who usually took time to give to others. They didn't necessarily stand there in the hallway saying, hug. They shared their notes. They shared their research. They published the information they got from their classes. Who does that? Someone who's trying to build community, that's who. And this person wants so badly to connect and to demonstrate their value, they would go at 110% on their inbuilt reactor. And the beast got them. And they burned out and stopped showing up at all. And so I saw it for what it was, and I tried to offer some encouragement. That doesn't mean it's going to fix all of it. It just means take a moment to realize we're not alone out there. Don't do this alone. This is a community for a reason. That doesn't mean everyone gets along. That doesn't mean there aren't jerks and messy things. This is a soup we swim in. Sometimes you have to go, that tastes good today. And other days it's time to maybe get the strainer out and try something else. There are always going to be different things, but there is still valuable learning to be done. Still, you have to fight back. A wiser friend, a mentor told me that life is like a wave. Know that sometimes you're riding up, the down is coming. If you're down, you come back up. One way or the other, just keep riding the wave so that you can see the next rise. Now the adventure continues. Don't be afraid to revisit this idea, as I was talking about earlier. You may unlock something completely different, a yet undiscovered new level, something you didn't even know about yourself. Just like I learned that the art of noise only existed because the band Yes existed, and because the music programming needed to get done. That changed my life. And it took me 30 years to know that. Because when this all started, liner notes don't exactly share these stories. But to read one article about how this person got their start and what gave them the idea for the band, mind blown. I would never have put those two things together. But now, this brings out that reflection. It takes time to see these changes, and you don't know which arc you're in necessarily. Get someone to help you from the outside to look in. Have those conversations. Write it down on a piece of paper. Use Trello or some other tool that allows you to organize these things. But realize that this impacts everything about what you do. When you're at your job and you're thinking about the things you want to do and you go to conferences to pick up that next piece of information, you bring that back with you. When you get to work on your hobbies, maybe it's someone you ran into here at Circle City this year. Maybe it's at DEF CON. Maybe it's at your local meetup. You don't know. I wound up rerunning into someone 2 months ago whom I hadn't seen in 20 years. And they changed my perspective on a few things as I got a different side of that story. So never discount those things. You have to have that sounding board, and honest feedback makes things better. Honest feedback. Okay? Sometimes you have to tell the person the baby's ugly. You just have to tell them. And they're going to be angry with you. I have a situation right now where someone told me that an idea that I am pursuing at B-Side San Antonio is not to their liking. And I had to say, okay. I wrote the email. Here's a huge tip. Write the email with all of the frustration that is in your being, but do not hit send. Right? Put tape on the screen, whatever you have to do. Do not hit send. Write it out, get it out so it isn't burning a hole through part of you, and then delete it. And then go for a walk. Maybe a snooze. Come back, now write the message back that needs to be written, that needs to be said. But taking into account that this person has their perspective they're seeing it from. Anyway. Usually it's not easy to hear these things. Don't be timid. Be willing to respond and explain. But this is my first InfoSec mentor, and there have been many, listened to my stuff and my goals, and they offered ways to achieve them. But as they put it, I still had to do the work. Okay? This is not easy. I've described for you what has taken place for me over the course of 18 years. This is a version of that story. And if the underperforming kid from middle school who hid out in the AV do this work and have a career that has lasted for 18 years based on it, I'm pretty sure you can make some headway on your own. So, cool story. You don't know me? Don't worry about that. Be afraid, that's okay. We're building a community together. Let's help each other grow and make it better. This is the story of your career, of your adventure. Please do not miss out on it. It is something you should not miss. And I hope the very, very best for each of you. How are we for time? Got a couple of minutes. Are there any questions? Yes.
So you talk about writing that email that you're going to delete.
Yes, sir.
To help them. Let's say when you go to delete it, you accidentally hit send.
So the question was, what happens if you're writing that angry email that you plan to delete and accidentally slip and hit send? If you're using certain online services, there is a 4-second undo. I would recommend you use it. Alternatively, there is such a thing as the consequences. When those moments take place, you must now live with your actions. There is no escaping doing the work. And at some point, you either do the work or do something else. There's no magic pill to fix when someone is angry with you. I used to try to do it on the phone. I did phone support for over a decade. And when I'd be on the phone, now there are different levels of support, of course. In those levels, in that mix, I try to joke to kind of lighten the mood. But when the customer, and you just hear a low growling from the other end and you realize that's not going to fly, you have to figure out another answer. And at that point it becomes yes, no, let me get my supervisor, because there's no fixing that mood. There's only addressing. So if you hit send on that angry one, be prepared. You may have just burned that bridge. And there's no going back. You didn't mean to, but it happens. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Remark, question, and remark again. First thing is Notepad, WordPad. I've been doing what you said for years. Write it out so it doesn't get sent out, but in an environment that will save you credit.
Good suggestion.
My background, I've actually recently realized I didn't count on things I have done. I've come back better, validated a lot of stuff to me, and now it's a lot more thought process. I like thinking about that. And the one thing I like to anybody, if you're dealing with public speaking, I'm the best at it. The best thing is to do if you have something, it's like Toastmasters. Everybody, anybody in your community, it's the best to be involved with the fact that you get any topic, it doesn't matter. You don't need to be an expert about the art of speech, the art of thought forming, and to be able to go speaking from anybody and not freak out. And we're, as a community, have that issue. So Toastmasters is something to look into. It will help everybody get up there eventually.
Thank you very much. And for the recording's sake, the tip that was offered was try writing the angry email in something that isn't your email editor. Write it in Notepad or something else. And the other comment from the gentleman from the audience was, Toastmasters is a great way to break the ice on learning how to build yourself as a presenter, learning about manners and structure and order. It can be a fantastic competitive adventure all its own, but it will help with that part of the journey. All right. Any other questions? Yes, sir. Oh, excuse me. Sorry. Yes, miss. The question was, have I ever suggested someone, pointed them towards therapy as a way to handle some of, or to work on some of the imposter syndrome? And the answer is, I honestly, as a younger person, I had a little bit of therapy, and it actually was good because It helps you get those things out there. In some ways, it might be seen as paying someone to ask you the hard questions that other people are unwilling or unable to ask you, to face about yourself. That is a good point. There is a group that's called the Mental Health Hacker Village. Those folks will help discuss through some of those things. That's a good idea as well. Thank you very, very much for bringing that up. Anything else? Yes.
If I wanted to do a talk, or if I'm like, so I'm not even in, like I'm recently graduated, I got to do that.
Well, congratulations for graduating. Good for you.
You know, long road. Good. But, like, I'm not even in, like, have, like, I'm not sure what I can bring to the talk.
Certainly.
Something like science, something outside the field.
Good.
Where do you go there in the art?
So, to me, and to repeat for the recording, the question was, I just graduated in a different field. I'm not in this field in particular. And tell me if I get this wrong. But
I'm in the field, but I don't.
okay, so what do I bring to a talk if I'm coming from outside in and I want to know what I should start to talk about? So, to me, since you're asking, I believe the answer lies within. Whatever it is that you found interesting or you've been learning, take that for a minute. It's something you discounted because you've done it 100 times. There's someone else who's never done that, whatever that thing is. So take that, step back from it, look at it and say, okay, I just reinstalled whatever it was. Write that up as your talk. It's the framework to start building from. Because what you're doing is trying to learn how to share information, in my opinion, how to share the information, and then you're going to arrive there. I had a very similar experience about 6 years ago, where I stood in front of the local meetup group and said, I want to talk to you about something. I have a voice. I've got a face for radio and a voice that goes with it, so this will be fine. And they said, you are not allowed to call yourself dumb, you're not allowed to do this, you're not allowed to do that, but we want to hear from you. What have you been doing? And it turns out their heckling is actually a form of love in that group. I don't know about the groups you spend time with, but it turns out a silent room is a bad one. Engagement is engagement. Learning is learning. So whether it's standing up your very first server or figuring out your very first run on how to exploit